That was such an awesome introduction. I've never had such a great introduction before in my life. It's so great to be here and see everybody in the audience. A few weeks ago when they asked if I would moderate these panels, I was just absolutely tickled. And I tell you what, this was the first Monday I really look forward to. All weekend long, I was thinking about this weekend, looking at the panelists, thinking about the people that were going to be here. I just couldn't wait to be here. And actually, I got to interview Chris just before he gave his presentation, and Chris is a really inspiring guy, and he really got me thinking about what we do at the Tech Council and how all the organizations in this whole region can really be working together to create these environments where we can have entrepreneurs just flourishing and just having opportunities pop up wherever they can. And the thing that really rung true with me is the idea that this is like climbing Mount Everest. You got to go to every single base camp. There's no one solution where in 2 years we claim success. I've been covering tech for 20 years, and I've seen the needle move, but it's taken 20 years to see that needle move, so patience is a must. But I just see the passion. As mentioned before, I was working with the Bridge to Pittsburgh initiative, and it's the passion that I've seen in the Johnstown area and Cambria County that has really blown my mind. I've worked with so many great people that have inspired me and my coworkers at the Tech Council, so coming to events like this, I just think are completely awesome. And the big thing about the Tech Council, we love to connect people as well too. That's the other big takeaway I got from Chris, is the idea that it's about connections, connections, and connections. That's what the Pittsburgh Technology Council does. And we're actually celebrating 35 years of doing that here in 2018. And I'd be remiss to say it's been more than 10 years that my co-host and my boss, Audrey Russo, our CEO of the Tech Council, have been doing Tech Vibe Radio, where we get to interview the men and women that are building these great companies. So I love being able to ask questions and talk to this great panel here. So when I was studying up this weekend, I just couldn't wait to get started as far as that is. And so really, I think just quickly, I want to have just each panelist just give a quick elevator pitch about what you do, just so our audience can get to know who you are real fast, because we've got a lot of panelists to just be super fast. And then we're going to jump into my first question of the day. I cannot wait. So, Dawn, let's start with you, and we'll work our way down the line.
I was told we'd have 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Well, then make it your best 2 minutes you could possibly do.
All right, I'll try to be as brief as I can. I'm Don Morrison. I'm delighted to be here. I have, without question, the best job in Western Pennsylvania, because like Chris, I get bored easily, and I get involved in a lot of different things. I get to wear a lot of different hats. One of the hats I wear is chairman of Deal Flow for Blue Tree Allied Angels, which is the most active angel investment group in the mid-Atlantic states. I am also, one day a week, an entrepreneur in residence at the University of Pittsburgh, so I meet with student entrepreneurs. I coach and mentor teams at Alpha Lab Gear, also CMU's Project Olympus. And for the last 7 years, I've been on the board of the Linden Point Development Corporation, which I think might be a model for rural areas.
That might be one of my questions coming up.
Linden Point Development Corporation has two main initiatives. One is an incubator, which when I first joined the board thought of as the Kevin Costner, if you build it, they will come kind of thing out in the middle of nowhere. The other initiative we have, which is a Longview play, is an Entrepreneurship Academy, which brings in high school seniors from 12 local high schools and teaches them entrepreneurship. And the kids are amazing, and the resources are true. So why do I say I have the best job in Western Pennsylvania? Because essentially all the hats I get to wear, it gives me the privilege of every day working with entrepreneurs. So again, I'm happy to be here, and I'm sorry I exceeded my 2 minutes. I'll cede the floor.
Thank you, Don. Dolores Zimmerman, I'm the president of Praxis Strategy Group in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and Fargo, North Dakota, which Chris mentioned. And we started in 1994. We're an economic development policy and strategy company, of course. And we work with clients all around the country. Our largest client, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, smallest client, entrepreneurs that have an idea and are wondering how they can get something going in their community. In 2009, we formed Praxis Africa, which is an affiliate network of development professionals, and we have people in Ghana since 2009, Liberia since 2016, and we just went into Tanzania. So we're pretty excited about how that's all working out. And glad to be here. I'm a graduate of Penn State, so this is my second home. Always glad to be here. Oh.
Thanks. Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here. My name's Eric Pages. I lead a consulting firm called EntreWorks Consulting. We're based in Arlington, Virginia. We specialize in entrepreneurship and particularly in smaller communities and rural areas. Have, as of last week, when I signed the contract in Indiana, we've now worked in 46 states across the United States and have done quite a lot of work here in Pennsylvania. Last year, we did the economic diversification strategy for Somerset County, and we just recently finished a report, which hopefully will get released very soon, for the Appalachian Regional Commission, mapping ecosystems across Appalachia that looks at best practices for voting communities like yours across the 13-state region of Appalachia. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Maureen Mulvihill, and I'm president and CEO of a company called Actuated Medical. We're located in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. We've been around for about 11 years, and we've grown from 2 to about 23 people. We are a true entrepreneurial entity. A lot of our innovations are funded using small business innovation research grants from NIH and NSF. And with that, we have about 10 to 12 products on bench right now being developed, and we have 17 issued U.S. patents.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Mersil with RateSource Capital. I specialize in organizing investors into angel groups. I've formed more angel groups around the country than anybody, about 40. I'm working with Mike and other entrepreneur leaders in the region to form a group here. We hope to kick that off and launch that probably early fall. And the reason I do this, I think more important than my background, is because I started working in a small town in rural Minnesota that was going through a depression like you've gone through. And the leadership of that community came together and they would put equity into deals, and they learned to do what Chris was talking about, backing entrepreneurs. And I learned that if you can capture innovation in your own backyard, you can have development success. And it was a do-it-yourself proposition. You did it yourself or it didn't get done. So I am a believer that there's lots of opportunity here, and what I'm about is organizing folks to be able to capture those opportunities by providing expertise and capital.
That was like 37 seconds. That was good. Very pithy.
He's timing it.
I'm Mike Rushka. I'm a maker. I had Lincoln Logs and Rector Set and Legos too. Anybody have all 3 of them? They're great stuff for building. 15 years ago, if you asked me if I was ever going to come back to the area, I grew up in Johnstown in the area, I would have told you no way, not going to happen. But I looked at what was going on in the area and said, wow, this place has some amazing spare parts, and we're small enough that we have the connectivity and can make some magic happen. When I was in DC, it was at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, developing tech and products and tech transfer and commercialization. And today I have a company that I founded when I moved back here that builds products for other people. We're strategy, technology, and product mercenaries. We make cool stuff that's awesome and useful really fast.
Thank you for your introductions. And Mike, since you got us all kind of started, I'm going to start with you. And after you answer, anybody in the panel can kind of jump in, because I think there's so many different perspectives on this. So, I mean, I've been seeing lots of studies where it seems like all growth is coming from small businesses, that it's no longer people relying on the big corporations to provide the growth, but it's people going out there hanging a shingle, whether it's a tech company, whether it's a coffee shop, whatever it may be, it's about small businesses. Like, what do you see driving small businesses, especially in the Alleghenies region, that's really exciting you and getting you fired up?
And I think people have the passion and they want to do something. It's a matter of like surrounding them, as Chris talked about, with the tribe.
Right.
It gives them the opportunity. I think when we do the showcase this afternoon, people might be a little bit inspired because there are a lot of people here that just did it in some ways. You know, I was asked 10 years ago, what does the future for economic development look like? And I said, we don't necessarily need 800-person companies. We need 108-person companies.
Love it.
Because that creates a sustainable and resilient basis for growing an economy in some way. So who are the people that want to do stuff, and how do we help them? I think that's the most important question.
Very cool. Any other insights? Absolutely.
One of the things I read recently was they were showing that startups correlate with recession. So as you have recessions and people getting laid off, they're inventing ways to employ themselves, and that pushes the startup. And the other thing that I think's happened in this country is it's become more acceptable and more mainstream to be able to be an entrepreneur and go out and start something. You know, my parents would have never thought of that. They were going to work for a corporation and retire kind of thing. Now people are thinking, well, I don't want to do that. I want to start my own thing.
Very much so. Yes.
So I represent the medtech sector, and Bellefonte, Pennsylvania is not where the medtech hub is. But what I have in Bellefonte is I have people that love coming to work and people that want to make a difference. and they just love what we do. They love, like I said, coming to work, and that's why we're here in Central PA.
Well, I think one thing that a lot of communities make the mistake of is focusing, they think entrepreneurship is only tech software companies, and entrepreneurship is really any small business that's starting, and there's no judgment in a difference between a lifestyle business and a angel fundable business.
I'm glad you raised that point, because a lot of times the emphasis is put just on tech. And I love tech, we all love tech, but there's other businesses as well too.
Well, not every company is going to be the next, Google or Amazon. And what we're trying to do in Hermitage is really create programming for the tech companies that are coming through our incubator and accelerator, but also provide services to local lifestyle businesses so they can develop a website, talk to their customers through digital social media and things like that, because rising tide raises all boats.
Without a doubt. So Eric, you're going to chime in, and then I know Delore, you have something to say, and I have a follow-up question for you as well. So,
Okay.
Just saying.
Yeah, I know we're about startups here, but when you really look at the data, most jobs in the United States are started by startup companies, new companies, growing companies, and what are called middle market companies, companies that have been around for a while and have hit a growth spurt. So when we think about innovation and entrepreneurship, we want to not only focus on the startup, not that I don't love startups, but we also want to look at where our growth opportunities across the company spectrum, across the age of the companies, because there's lots of other hidden opportunities in firms that have existed in your community for a while and just needed an infusion of innovation or new ideas or a new market that they can capture. So there's also growth opportunities there.
So the sheet that you've got in your programs, the High Performance Community Scorecard, we actually first developed that with the Center for the New West in the mid-'90s. And even at that time, the most prominent sources of growth were small business. Not always startups, but small business. So to me, this is a trend that's been overlooked, over-ignored, and underappreciated for a long time. And so I think regions, communities that get on board with it, whenever they get on board with it, is just to their advantage, because that's the long-term source of growth.
So Dillard, tell me more about some of the research that you guys do and how you kind of evaluate communities and regions to see kind of where their strengths and weaknesses are when it comes to being able to move forward and build these types of communities. And any of that apply to what we're doing here in the Alleghenies?
Sure. Well, we do a lot of the same things Chris does, just go in and talk to people and see how people talk about their situation, how people talk about how they see the future. And by talking to a lot of people, either in small groups or individually, you learn a lot about how people are thinking about the future and whether they're thinking about it at all. And so I think that's very valuable. The scorecard that we developed is really just one way to think about this is how successful communities are acting. I think the most important thing is acting, not that you have to do any certain thing. For example, in some of the things we talk about with entrepreneurship, it's important to nourish entrepreneurship, but not everybody needs an incubator, not everybody needs an accelerator. Every community's got to find their own way to do it. And so I think that's the key to it.
Interesting. So I want to hear from Maureen and Mike Haruska on this, and after this, anyone can please jump in. Maureen, I thought it was really interesting when you're like, Central PA is not the hot spot for what you do, but you're there. So what keeps you there? Obviously, something's working right for you guys. You're a business, you got to make money. If you weren't making money there, you'd be someplace else. What is it that has you being where you are in Bellefonte? Which I've always driven past, and I always want to see historic Bellefonte as I go through doing
historic Bellefonte.
Yes.
Yeah, there were a lot of governors in the 1800s from Bellefonte. I don't think any will happen again, but you never know, right?
You never know.
Yeah, there you go. My next career, But anyway, so we're in Bellefonte because Central Pennsylvania really is Happy Valley, right? It's a wonderful place to live and raise a family. The schools are good. The lifestyle's good. There's lots of things that are happening there. And if you talk to some of our employees, they were like stalked us until they saw a job offer, a job opportunity on the website. So we always say about, can you get the tech to work for you? I never have a problem getting people to work for me. They see it and they want to be part of something that's different. But I've had several venture capitalists tell me I had to move to Boston or I had to move to San Francisco because we're not in a med tech ecosystem. And I'm like, why would I do that? My cost of living is so much less. Like, so we'll say my rent space is about $10 a square foot. Where in Boston
Wait,
am I
back
gonna
up, $10 a
square
square.
foot, right?
Wow.
And I have a manufacturing facility there. Where in Boston am I going to find that? Right?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Right? And then when you look at the people, like I said, they love coming to work, and it's all about. Chris talked about culture being the number one thing. When we started Actuated, we made sure the culture was very strong. And so, I mean, honestly, if somebody doesn't fit the culture, they leave. And so it's just one of those things, and there's a lot of books out there, and Chris was quoting books and books and books to read, but, you know, Good to Great says when you have all the right people on the bus, you will grow, and I have all the right people on my bus.
I just love hearing that. That's such a great story. We don't hear those types of stories enough because I think that might inspire people. So when you got a guy like Mike Caruso who wears the coolest blue shades that I've ever seen, you can build your company anywhere in the world that you would like because you are one of the smartest dudes that I know. But you do it here in Johnstown. Why?
Why not?
Love it. Very cool.
That's the answer for you. No, I mean, there's something that's magical here. The amount of trails, the quality of life. There's no traffic. I guess if we're successful doing all these things, I'll have to make reservations everywhere and wait at red lights and traffic on the expressway. But until then, I mean, it's pretty fantastic. I've lived in D.C. and Phoenix and Denver and a number of other places and visited cities in 49 states. I got Alaska. I know that was your next question. What's
Exactly
last?
right.
But I mean, there's something magic here, and I think that there's a huge opportunity to raise where we're at to something else. And I love change, and I think that the delta that we have in front of us is so big that I don't even know what's possible in the future. But the quality of life's amazing. If I'm recruiting someone, they want to come in and they want to be the coach of the football team or anything, they can do it. You can do really anything you want. It's almost like a blank canvas and a huge opportunity.
I feel like it's the idea that you can be a pioneer to a certain degree. You can actually make change. You can be a bigger cog in the machine and actually make change and see it happen. Is my perception correct in that?
It's a living laboratory.
Love it. Very, very cool. Anyone else to follow up on that? Absolutely, Eric.
I'll
Yeah.
just add, so in our as a business, I've probably interviewed 10,000 entrepreneurs in the last decade, and I always ask them, why are you in the place? Why are you located in Pennsylvania? Why are you located in Maryland, wherever you're located? The answer is always, because I'm from here, because I live here. That's people that are successful entrepreneurs have a connection to the community. And if you look at the ranking of location decisions for large corporate site selection, and you look at the rankings for location decisions by entrepreneurs, it's a totally different list. Although number one is the same for both, access to talent. For site selection, for corporations that move the traditional kind of economic development target, it's access to talent, then it's all various ways, costs of doing business, energy costs, labor costs, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at entrepreneurs, it's access to talent, then it's quality of life, then it's access to customers. Then it's networks. Those are the four things that matter most for entrepreneurs. So it's a completely different kind of decision matrix for entrepreneurs than it is for the 100-person manufacturing plant that's looking for tax incentives. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about development in your community.
I think one of the mistakes a lot of economic development organizations miss is, you should be very clear on what your objectives are. In Hermitage, early on, the city founders said specifically, the goal for economic development, how we're going to measure that is how many young people go off to college and come back to the community or stay in the community to start up new businesses and stay in that community. You don't want to become a feeder system to Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. You want to develop your businesses in your area, and you want them to stay in your area. That's my suggestion.
Love it. Very cool. Very cool. So when you're in these areas that further out, access to capital is, obviously for getting a company up and going, it's always to talk about access to capital. You don't go far without it. You need your customers, but you also need investment as well too. What are the challenges when you are in these outlying regions to actually access capital? I know people in Pittsburgh find it impossible, so they must find it equally more impossible in the regions just outside of Pittsburgh.
I think the biggest challenge for capital in rural communities is, it's not necessarily companies that are that have a little bit of traction, but I think it's in that very early seed stage capital. And, we're fortunate in Pennsylvania to have organizations like Ben Franklin Technology Partners that who, if you're an entrepreneur in the audience and you aren't familiar with Ben Franklin Technology Partners, you should be, because they're probably one of the biggest funding sources for capital for early stage companies. I think also, there's an opportunity for other local entities to provide that. The two questions I get asked most frequently about Blue Tree, one is just like Shark Tank, and I actually get kind of annoyed with that. So I say, yeah, it's exactly like Shark Tank. But the reality is it's more like American Idol, where there's a lot of good singers on the stage. So you're up there competing with Carrie Underwood. But the other question I get asked is, what does Blue Tree invest in? And my short answer is we invest in good ideas, and we determine, or we consider a good idea to be a company that has potential to scale to 20 to 30 million in revenue over 3 to 5 years. Because if you look at companies like Google, Amazon, Apple, when they acquire other companies, that's when those companies tend to get acquired. And when a company gets acquired, that's when our investors get their money back. Not every company is angel investable, and Blue Tree does invest in those high growth companies, but there's a lot of other very worthy lifestyle businesses that are out there, but there are alternative funding opportunities and sources for that. So I think if you're an entrepreneur, you have to decide if you're angel fundable or if you have to look for other sources. If you're a good idea, the funding will find you, and there's a lot of great resources to look.
Delor?
So
Absolutely.
just one of the challenges we've run into is if you're trying to raise money for a company that's in an industry or a sector that not many people are familiar with in your community, sometimes that's a barrier because they don't understand what the opportunity is, and they might not be that able to take that much risk. So that's a challenge sometimes.
Quick.
Steve?
Well, yeah. So I organize groups around the country, and a lot of them are in more rural areas like what we have here. And I think what I find in these communities, one of the barriers for the entrepreneurs is just simply having investors that are somewhat organized so that they know they're out there and they know where to go. So that's the first thing, and that's one of the main reasons we do what we do. And then I think the second thing is, in this day and age, the way we can network our angel groups and our individuals with other groups allows us to leverage expertise beyond the group.
And I would say that from the other side too, there's a difference between desiring funding as a company and being fundable. And I see a number of folks that really want funding.
It's an awesome point.
But
very good point.
They're not ready. They haven't baked the business model. They haven't done the customer development. And so when I'm working with people, I'm trying to get them to be fundable and put the right package together, because when you have a meeting, someone wants to see a certain amount of stuff, and if you're going to start to dance with an investor, you need to have the deal and you need to have the information together. So I think it's everybody just getting a bit more organized, and the
Very
problem
good.
might solve itself with the networking coordination.
Very, very cool.
So I
Maureen,
just want to
absolutely.
say that when you start your company or you're moving your company forward, think out of the box about funding. There's a lot of different economic development micro grants that can get you a little bit away. First of all, we did get invested by Ben Franklin, and I wouldn't be here, or my company wouldn't be here if it weren't for Ben Franklin, so we're very thankful. But when we were developing our third product, we wanted to test it out. And so ABDC Corp in Blair County gave us like a $2,500 micro grant. That micro grant gave us enough to fund a Penn State researcher to get us the data that we then used in an SBIR Phase 1 grant, which got us $150,000. That $150,000 and that collaborator at Penn State got us a Phase 2 SBIR grant for $1.5 million. So you can see Blair County gave us $2,500, and we just pulled in, $1.5 million. And now that product's on the market, and it's early sales. We're not there yet, but it's still moving forward. So just think out of the box and talk to a lot of people in the economic development area and see if there's some sort of funding that you can get to move your idea forward.
Excellent. Yeah, please. Eric.
I wasn't going to say anything, but Maureen's comments made me decide I need to flag this ARC research that we just finished, because what we found, we did a study and we looked at sources of capital, And what we found within the Appalachian region, and of course this part of Western Pennsylvania is part of that, much more small firms in this region are much more likely to get bank financing than businesses anywhere else in the United States, and they're also much more likely to use these public sources of financing than anywhere in the United States, so revolving loan funds and these grant programs. So this is a place where actually perhaps not equity is as rich a source, but these other sources of capital are, you have a much more robust source of these kinds of capital than you have in other parts of the United States.
Yeah. So now that we've talked about capital, equally as important, maybe even more important, is talent. And it was great to hear Maureen say that they're able to attract talent. I love hearing that because so many of our member companies at the Pittsburgh Technology Council, talent's their top concern. So talent, I mean, obviously without it you can't go anywhere. How are you attracting it? What are the pluses and the minuses? I know there's so many pluses. You have folks that like the outdoors and want to make an impact. I think I'd work for Mike in a second. I'd be like, yeah, let's go to Johnstown. So tell us about that more.
One key thing for us is, there's 4 higher education institutions in Cambria County, and they have 7,500 plus students and graduate more than 1,000 a year. So we're looking for computer science background and to help build products. So we've got a talent capability there. At the same time, and there's been a shrink in the defense marketplace. And so other companies have shed talent. We've tried to pick them up and really keep them in the area. Certainly try to market the recreation side of things, but I see a great amount of talent. I think the other piece associated with talent is talent that can help mentor companies as well. It's, the collective intelligence in a startup company is normally 1 or 2 people, and surrounding them with the right amount of intelligence at the right point in time is really good. That problem grows, though. If you surround yourself with too many mentors, then you get mentor shock, because Steve tells me what to do, and someone else tells me what to do, and I have no idea what to do, and everything just sounds great. I should just listen to you.
Mike, I can tell you've been reading Chris's book. Steve, yeah, Don.
I was just going to say, I think talent is a challenge anywhere. A lot of the entrepreneurs I meet with in Pittsburgh, a good number of my meetings are asking, do you know a programmer who can do this or that? I think, good ideas attract talent, and I think one of the tools that can be put in place is the University of Pittsburgh put a team finder function on their Innovation Institute website. So there's kind of a bulletin board for companies looking for talent. So I think communities can do the same thing, and certainly you want to make sure that all the local colleges and universities are aware of the companies looking for talent. But talent's a challenge anywhere, and one suggestion to any entrepreneurs out there is, you want to put together a balanced team. You don't want all engineers or all programmers. You want to find that balance.
Get the mix. Dolor, what do you think?
So one of the, sorry,
Go
Eric.
ahead, Dolor.
So one of the things we do is we do a wage analysis by occupation, and what often comes up is the kinds of people that areas and regions want to recruit, people most likely to move, are underpaid compared to other regions. And when you find that out, there's a good reason. If you're paying 80% of what other people in surrounding regions are paying, they're not going to move to your place no matter how much you say. It costs so much less to live here. Well, maybe it doesn't. So I think a good first step is a good comprehensive analysis of how you rate or how you rank compared to other regions.
Very interesting. Eric.
Yeah, I just want to take another take on a talent question. I mean, we all automatically think of employees with technical skills when we hear that question, talent. But there's also talent about understanding entrepreneurship and understanding what it's like, the skills to run a business. And so, teaching people about entrepreneurship is critically important. And I would say, really, in most communities in the United States, the number one thing you can do to groom your own talent is to get entrepreneurship education into the K-12 system so that young people are learning about entrepreneurship. If you want someone to come back to your community, teach them about entrepreneurship, and they'll come back and start a business in your community. So that's really one way to really develop talent. That ties in what Chris said. It also builds your culture. But the danger is that it's a 10 to 20 year play that you're thinking about. But that's the real way to build sustainable, long-term pool of talent for your community. And I know Don's doing that in his community. And I would encourage all of you to do that in your community too.
But I think if you're trying to put together a team or solve the talent problem, you have to think outside the box. It's not always about how much you're going to pay you. you want to find the best talent you can. And oh, by the way, you're an entrepreneur, so you have no money. So you can't pay A wages, but you need A talent. So how do you do that? You know, you have, one of the biggest things you have is equity in your company, and you can set up mechanisms to provide some type of equity incentives to people who believe in your idea, that they have some skin in the game if the company does well. If it doesn't do well, you know, they don't get paid, and it doesn't, it's not costing you an arm and a leg, but good ideas will attract talent, and there's a lot of creative ways to bring that talent on board.
So let's talk about access to resources. I know so many regions, including this area, have so many organizations out there looking to help, and we don't always know who they are because there's not like one place. Don, any ways that you can encourage people or give insight as to how to plug into all the resources that are actually in front of them? Is there a clearinghouse? Best ways to connect up?
Well, in Pittsburgh, we have several resources, and anyone who wants to email me, I'd be happy to send them. I have an outline of I call it the Pittsburgh ecosystem, and it has all the economic development entities like Innovation Works or Idea Foundry, C-level organizations like that. It has all the co-working spaces and also where you can get seed funding. And on a statewide level, Ben Franklin is the most omnipresent. There are SBIR and other government grants, which investors like because they're non-diluted. But I think each community is going to have a slightly different
Absolutely.
profile.
I know Mike has been like a clearinghouse of sorts. I see your name on emails with all types of things that you're intertwined with, and I think it's absolutely amazing. I don't know when you actually have time to sleep with all that you do. So kind of you being almost like a clearinghouse for everything entrepreneurship in the Johnstown area, what are the resources out there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources. I'd love to see your Pittsburgh innovation ecosystem stuff that you have, Don. That'd be interesting. I think that the challenge that I've seen with people is they say, there's a lot of stuff out there. What's the one thing that I do next, based upon where I'm at? So we started a monthly meetup for entrepreneurs. We have people from as far as Erie and Hagerstown, Maryland, and Morgantown that come to it. And Steve, I'll put you on the spot here. So how many people do you think might be in an entrepreneur meetup in Johnstown? What would be the maximum potential?
I think you'd have
154.
25. We have about 325 in the group.
Double my estimate. I love it.
And a number of the startups we're going to showcase this afternoon have come to the group, have shared their stories, have gotten resources, figure out, because knowing what to do next is everything. And when there's too many choices in front of you, people get diffused and distracted.
So cool. So we got about 5 minutes left to keep ourselves on track. Kind of like our wrap-up kind of a question. Ideally, where would we like to see this region in 10 years? I mean, being realistic, knowing the work that has to be done, but knowing a lot of the momentum that's already on our side. I'd love any thoughts as to where, what would be a measure of success 10 years from now, knowing that we have moved the needle?
At the risk of being sounding like a Debbie Downer, the only thing I know as a certainty is in 5, 10, 20 years, everything will be different.
It'll change. That's
It
for
will
sure.
be different. It can be different, in a good way. It can be different in a bad way. I think how it's different is really up to the leadership in the communities.
Interesting.
And how they approach, innovation and entrepreneurship.
So I think for any region that's outside a major metro area, there's two big challenges: thin markets, thin networks. Thin markets, your entrepreneurs need to reach out to other markets, whether it's in Pittsburgh, whether it's in New York City, whether it's in Africa. That's fundamental. The thin networks thing, when people can't find other people to team up with and collaborate with, that's a problem. So you got to be intentional about doing that, and this sort of thing is very good at that. So I see that you embrace this, and I think that's a great thing for the future.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous opportunity here. I think the kind of the roadmap that Startup Alleghenies is starting to put in place is essentially what you need. I mean, 10 years from now, you want to have more people starting businesses. You want to have a higher rate of growth businesses here. You want more people coming back to start businesses, and you want to see the region tightly connected into these more dense markets that Delore talked about. I mean, you're close to DC, you're close to Pittsburgh, you're close to Baltimore, you're relatively close to Philadelphia. That's where the customers are, and getting your entrepreneurs linked to those major markets and global markets as well is going to be essential.
So for Actuated, we're in Bellefonte, so we're right in the middle of the state. So it gives us like an advantage because I network with folks in Philly and I network with folks in Pittsburgh and I get to network with folks in DC, but I'm from this little rural community, so I kind of take advantage of that. So yes, I'm on the road a lot, but my people aren't, and I can leave work and I know everything will continue on the way that we need it to continue because we're all focused on the vision of the company. But it really, if you don't have that network, because we just said it was like thin here, and you can go outside, and people are wonderful. People want to help you. You're an entrepreneur. You're excited about what you do. You're positive energy. People will help you. And so that's what we've done, is we've just gone outside. When we're a member of several different trade associations in the med tech sector, and then those people are supportive of us because they know what we're doing and they know how hard it is, and they keep track. And one shout out I'm going to give is my lawyer's actually here, and he's from Pittsburgh. And so Metz Lewis has been very supportive of Actuated throughout the years. And Barry's my IP attorney and probably responsible for those 17 patents I mentioned when we started. But it's people supporting you and taking care of you and want you to be successful.
Very cool.
So the first meeting we had with the investor leadership group, with Mike's group, was about what would success look like to them 5 years from now. And they had a number of different characteristics, but essentially I would summarize it as saying they wanted to have enough success that was noticeable by the people in the region that it was really easy to do a second and larger angel fund.
I'm hopeful 10 years from now that it will be a logical step for every high school student to want to leave the area. I hope that every college student that comes here from somewhere else also leaves the area. But I hope they leave the area with one important connection that says when it's time and they've learned their trade and their craft and they want to do something amazing, that they realize there's a community here that could support them and build with them, and that they want to come back here as that obvious choice to build that thing here.
That is fantastic, and that's why I was so excited for Monday to get here this weekend, because I wanted to hear from all of you. Really, a round of applause for these folks up here. Great insight.